size.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming. It's good to see all of you. We'll go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, as I said, thank you for all of you coming. Welcome. We'll go ahead and start with the adoption of the agenda. We can have a motion whenever you're ready.
I motion to approve the agenda.
I will second that.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Those in favor of adopting the agenda? Okay. And then we move to adopt the consent agenda.
A motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda. Those in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, thank you. Okay, Board of Education acknowledgements. Do any board members have acknowledgements this evening?
I don't have any, Michelle.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, now we have administrators.
I just want to spotlight the inserts we've been doing this week. In particular, we had a true American hero named Kenny Thomas come and speak to a combined middle and high school staff earlier this week. And Kenny was part of the operation that the movie Black Hawk Down has been made about. And he was on Shock 3 in that. And he just had a really good message about finding a way to be part of the solution and knowing that the most important thing that you can do is to take care of the person on your left and the person on your right. And I thought our staff really received that message well. The other thing that he shared, and I really hope that our teachers heard, is when I ask for your help, it's when I need you the most. And so it's going to be a difficult time, and so it's going to require extraordinary effort to help truly make a difference and be part of the solution. So again, really fascinating story that he told, and I had several staff members go out of their way to thank middle school and high school staff for putting that together for him. And we'll see what kind of dividends that message may pay over the course of the year.
We don't have anything right now going on. Getting ready, fired up. If we're online, get your physicals in.
You say, so I just want to share, it's absolutely awesome to have staff back. We're excited to have them there. Thursday, everybody came back. I want to continue to talk about some of our pre-service stuff that we've done. This morning, we were up at the high school, the middle and high school staff were, and we listened to a lady talk about fentanyl. Super, super powerful. I think we're going to try to get her to come and talk to our kids as well. But I'm just telling you, scary, scary stuff. I've got 2 kids that are in high school also, and so, I mean, I've had those conversations with them, but again, it's just another reminder that it's only one time, and that's it. So excited to be able to have that come. And then we also had a group that came and talked from NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mental Illness. And I thought that their presentation was really good as well. It kind of goes in line with Jason Flat Act as well, even though we're doing the vector trainings on that virtually too, but we also shared some information with staff too. So some really, really good stuff for our teachers to get us started for the school year.
Last month I mentioned that the SOS event was coming up. Now the SOS event is passed and over with for another year. So I just want to thank everyone for their support of that event. Everybody's always interested to know how many people, and you'll hear enough of me about numbers later tonight, but it's kind of a moving target. So how many are registered, how many actually showed up, but safe to say, I like the newspaper story, over 200. I think we were at 229, but there's some duplicates and things, so we got to kind of weed through all that. So it's kind of a moving target. But bottom line is, good help for the community, and to me, I'm proud that the community supports it, and all the organizations that come together to do that for our community But even bigger than that, if you notice, Osawatomie had theirs just recently. Spring Hills was this last weekend, and I've helped Sharon meet there at Spring Hill with information and knowledge to help get theirs going. I was out of town, wasn't able to attend theirs, but it's good to see it growing to other communities. And then the spinoffs, like if you saw the sunflower stuff that they were doing, and a lot of things that this community and the school district does to help kids. And that's what we're all here for.
Justin and I ran the new teacher orientation. That was really exciting. It's always good.
Tammy ran it. I watched.
He's in training. So we had 10 new staff members, 9 new teaching staff. So very excited about the upcoming year with them. So.
As Mark mentioned, we are currently, we being the district staff, completing our mandatory trainings through Vector Solutions for online training modules. And I'm very pleased to share their staff have, in the first week, completed 1,026 modules. And so that works out, there are 6 modules they need to do to 171 people, so over halfway done in the first week. So that's good because we have a little bit of internal competition going, which building is going to finish first. And a couple of buildings thought they were going to finish first. I had to remind them they had Rule 10 coaches that had to do them too. So that kind of dampened the parade there. Feel like we're a little bit behind on hiring pairs right now. Partially that's due to the job market. Partially that is due to a couple districts with almost new administrative staff. And so when that happens, they're just behind to start. They don't even know how many pairs they need to hire until they show up and meet with staff, and then they're scrambling. And so that's kind of what's going on in my world right now. It's processing, onboarding. Matt's probably getting tired of seeing the emails come in.
Anything else? Okay, so next we have the budget hearing. So we need a motion to open the 2024-2025 budget hearing.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Those in favor of opening the 2024-25 budget hearing, please raise your hand. Are there any public comments for the budget hearing? So if there aren't any, we'll go ahead and, Jimmy, when you're ready.
All right, perfect. Well, again, it seems like July was a year ago, and then it seems like it was yesterday too. But so you saw the preview of everything, and so now this is kind of the final and a little more detail about the budget. So I will go through it as quickly as possible, but there is a lot of information, and we do spend a lot of time on certain elements of it. But board members, if you have questions, stop me on that slide if it seems more appropriate there. Happy to be interrupted. So we'll just get started. So a lot of this is the same format and things that we do every year. And thanks for Brian for always taking my hopefully I have a good slide and a good side.
Is that your good side?
I did look back to make sure I didn't wear the same shirt this year. So that would be bad to pay for. So I should always buy a new one every budget year. That way Brian can never get the same one. Sorry, not used to people taking a photo. This is all the information that we're going to go through and kind of summarize. It's all on our website. We put everything out there, even more than what's required. This is kind of the summary. It's again all on the front page of the website, right in the middle, and then it's under here under quick links. There's actually other ways to get to it too. Under the business office, you can go under budget and you can see the 24-25 budget and also last year's budget. So we keep 2 years of history out there. And a lot of the information that we'll go through in the budget review is a document I put together that has a lot of history in it, much more than the 2 years. So far more information out there than required, but again, it's transparency, it's all there. And that's all the clickable links that are out there that anybody can pull up. It's also in board docs, but this is right up from the website. So again, the building needs assessment is a big part of it. Legislatively, it has to be a part of it. And so this is just kind of a refresher of those things to show what you as board members have looked at for the building needs assessment, what's been presented. That has to also be on the district website, and it is, you saw that in that list. It has to be in the minutes when the budget is approved, which is tonight, that you've looked at those things, the building needs assessment and the state assessment results, and talked about barriers and how to overcome those things. So again, the needs assessment, the barriers to overcome, anybody that's in level 2, you remember Tammy going over all the assessments and the results there. Budget actions and resource allocation, and then the amount of time the board thinks it would take to get everyone to level 2 based on once those barriers were all removed. Perfect world, I guess. This is just information, again, won't spend a lot of time. The link's there. I cut some snippets out, again, just about what you're supposed to do, the required notices and things. The Code 99 has been in the newspaper, and that's what we're doing here tonight. It's the legal hearing notice. The public has the opportunity to speak beforehand. We try to answer any questions. Again, it's kind of a little bit redundant there. Each building needs assessment form had these 9 sections, and so I just put the titles in there. You can look down that. I won't read those all off. This was a snippet of the high school, section 1, so that should look familiar, that you remember seeing that. Those were several pages long of all the different sections and information there. This was from back in January, kind of a summary of all of them that I think Tammy worked with Scott on a report that was due to KSDE, if I remember right on that. But, signed off on what we had talked about there with the summary. Again, in May, this is straight from board docs. It was on the May board agenda. All the information is out there, publicly available in the content area, where you can look at those and see all the details. Again, the state assessment reviews, that was done at the June board meeting that Tammy presented all the assessment results. And this again is that part about how to address the barriers to get everybody to level 2 and above. And a little summary there, that was one of Tammy's slides. And again, overarching everything is we have the board goals. They're on the back wall, I think they're on the wall of every school building, and I'm certain they're on our website too. But those are kind of the big categories and the overarching things, district goals for curriculum, budget, facilities, communication. So again, something I think good to always keep in mind. This is the goals through 2026. So again, we'll get into some specifics as we go through a lot of these funds. Some of this is general information, and then there'll be specific information to our district. So a lot of this applies no matter what school district. The general fund, the mill levy is 20 mills. That's state law. Every district levies the 20 mills. That's we'll talk later how the general fund is actually calculated, but that's the taxing standpoint of it, the 20 mills. So that's a component of our total mill levy. The funds in there are transferred to other programs. We'll talk about that a little more in depth, but a very simplistic view, your general fund is your base state aid for people, again, the amount set by the legislature, times your weighted enrollment. That's your general fund budget in a very simplistic point of view. In the general fund and the budget, you have to make a lot of assumptions because we don't know what things are going to be. There's a lot of estimates. And this is kind of some of the main assumptions and estimates. So September 20th is count day, and that's really what our funding is based on, largely. What the head count is on September 20th and the FTE on the day. So the things that we have to plug in, we have to put in the budget what our estimated head count is for pre-K through 12th grade. So all of our K-12 enrollment. The number of free lunch students, because that generates your at-risk funding. How many career and technical clock hours, how many classes and students are going to be taken at the high school, the total hours, then that's converted to the FTE that gives us our vocational funding. Bilingual, same thing. The number of pupils transported, because that generates the funding for students as the state pays anybody over 2.5 miles, which is who we transport. That's the weighting, so we have to put in an estimate of that. And then our estimated virtual students, because that sets that budget as well. You have to also put in your delinquent tax rate. So again, when we're making these assumptions, like you'll see the delinquent tax rate later, you want to aim high because you don't want to budget less and have something change. If your delinquency rate popped up and you had budgeted way low, you're going to collect less tax. You're not going to have enough money to fund your budget. So there's a lot of assumptions in there, and you'll see that again later on a slide where I do some comparison to the prior year of what those assumptions do. But again, this is all about budget authority. So it's setting the legal maximum. We can never exceed what you do tonight. Now, with the caveat, you can do some republication. After tonight, it doesn't change local taxes because tax bills go out, you can't change it next April. We can republish general fund or things for state aid if we had to. The goal is to not have to republish just because of the time and expense of doing that. So you try to build enough cushion in for any contingencies that may happen. Because again, these are estimates. You don't know what those numbers are going to be until they're known and after. So again, there's a lot of things in there when you see a chart like this, and I gave board members all of you the copy of the budget review, the bigger version. So when you see things that look like these headings, that's coming straight out of that. And that's in budget fund order, and it has prior year information, current year information, and a lot of details. So there's a lot of history in that. And that is on the website for the general public to see too, and also on board docs. But honestly, that is a document that I started doing, well, probably in my first year here. But I refer to that throughout the whole year more than anything. I think it's hopefully easier to understand than the budget codes and things that are kind of a foreign type thing. This is more chart table-based information, hopefully easier to read. Not necessarily more fun to read, but hopefully lighter, easier to follow. So again, this is the first one in there, the base state aid per pupil history. It's good to know what's happened in there. We have a couple years, we have the block grant in there, there's some things, a running history here of what that base state aid has done. So if you look at the total change, again, this is, I think, a 17-year period. And so that base state aid is up $945 per student, or about 21.3%. So if you divide that out, it averages, this is an average, of 1.25% per year. Now obviously, there were some years that were negatives, and then the legislature and the funding, and now we're at a point where it's tied to CPI. There was a multi-year funding plan after the last school finance litigation, and now we're to the point that it's tied to CPI. So you can see this year that's a 5.7% increase. The LOE, this is where it can get a little bit confusing because it's not a simple formula, but if you study it a little bit of time, it's very easy to follow it, but it does take some effort. The local option budget is calculated on a higher base state aid, and that's based on the statute. It's been that way for a while, and so that's a higher number, but I always put that figure in there. And again, the future base state aid increases are now tied to CPI. Again, just a different, this is KSD East history, a lot of that's the same in there. They'll update this later for this coming year, but this is a similar slide, just history, a little different layout. This is a slide, again, exact same from last year when I showed the change, and 24-25 budget, which is what we're in, is now tied to CPI. So that was just kind of showing you again what we had said. These were the 3 years of the Gannon case, and then now we're at the CPI. So again, future, that's the same base state aid. This is a slide directly from the state budget workshop, the KSD slide, showing that base state aid, the LOB base being higher. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the additional special ed funding that's coming this year that was passed by the legislature. So again, I mentioned that it's all based on, the general fund is based on our head count. This year alone, this again is a slide from the budget workshop, your general fund is either based on the higher of your current year enrollment, which again is a guesstimate until it's done and audited, you don't know what that's going to be. We'll go through kind of how we come up with our projections, or the prior year enrollment, which is a known audited number. But for this year only, there's a third option, which is the average of the prior year and the second preceding year. I think a better way to say that is 2 years ago and 3 years ago. So current year is this year, year one, where last year was prior year 2, or the second preceding year, so 2 years ago enrollment. Again, unknown number. And you'll see in a minute, this was the KSDE. We're going to talk a little bit more about 150 as well. But for us, this is what we're using this year, because that was the higher of those 3 options. And that is for this year only. So again, these are the actual FTEs. This again is a projection, because we don't know what that's going to be on September 20th. We'll collect all that once we get enrollment finalized. The buildings do the principal building report, uploads into the SO66, which is the superintendent's organizational report. That's what gets funded and audited by KSDE. So again, just a recap down here. This is, again, last year's enrollment, this year's estimated, and this is that second preceding. So again, 3 years ago and 2 years ago. So it's the 1773 and the 1772.7 average. Well, again, Those are only 0.3 apart. So the average is 1772.9, and we get the higher of, which in this case, for us, is that average. That is only for this year. So next year, barring any legislative changes, that won't be an option. So you can see what would have happened if we were, if that wasn't an option, we would be one of those two numbers. So you kind of can see what's coming there. There's about 40 roughly FTE difference in that we'll have to account for next year if nothing has changed. We won't be having that third option. When you see charts like this, there's a lot of information in the budget too. All of it's an Excel program driven. Every district does it the exact same way, same format. You can't change that. These are static charts that come out of the budget program. So we don't control the range, the values that are shown there, the shape, the size, anything. So there's no control on our part of what these look like. So if you have an issue with the chart, I can tell you what number to call, but we don't have any control over these. So I like to point that out because it's not necessarily maybe the best way to display things. But this is the FTE, and I just remind you that this year obviously is an estimate. But you can see again, there's those 2 years, and that's what we're using the average of. This is information back from 1920, but this I haven't changed at all. It's still relevant, it's about to the end, but KASB had done some projection studies based on population trends and things, and this is what they said was going to happen through 24-25, the budget year we're in. They were projecting the total enrollment statewide would decline, and we've seen that. Some districts are growing, but as a whole, the statewide enrollment has declined. They predicted no notable changes in ELL or bilingual. The at-risk numbers or special ed. Birth rates have declined 13% in the last decade. Again, this is from 1920. But they also said that enrollment by grade shows a notable decrease in lower grades, making a continued decline in enrollment past 24-25 likely. And we're seeing that here locally as well. This year, our kindergarten class is smaller than what we graduated last year. So, if that trend continues, we're going to continue to decline as well because we're graduating more than we're bringing in. We'll see that more in a minute on an enrollment study. The city of Paola did their Paola Plan in 2050. This again is a story from the Republic back from 21 when that came out. So I won't go through a lot of details there, but I thought it was interesting the population growth of Paola for the year 2050. It's a long way out, a lot can happen. But it would have grown 49.5%, which I think sounds huge, but over a 30-year period in there, it's only 1.65% a year. So not a lot of growth in our town either, which obviously we're just seeing the impacts of that. This is old, so I don't know how relevant these prices still are, but housing had helped, or will help, or could help. And this was the new development at Hidden Meadows, and I think a lot of those houses now are sold and are owner occupied, and hopefully they all have 7 kids in each one. But, so again, this is the postcard from when they went on the market, so don't know if the selling prices are correct. But that was a good development that helped give some housing here in town. This should look familiar to board members that have been on a while. You remember that RSP was the company Matt worked with and did the enrollment analysis. So again, we refer to this. They did a lot. There's a lot of pages of this, so I'm going to pull out certain sections. You can still find this in board docs, or it's probably linked even on our website also, so you can see the full thing. But I pulled out what I thought was relevant. At the time, these were the known, and these were the future, and that's where we're at now. I'll zoom in on that. So again, we're at 24-25. But you can see kind of the trend where they were showing, based on all their demographic study and things that they were predicting, that we were still going to decline a little, and hopefully we're kind of flatlining, bottoming out. But again, give you all that other just for history. So this is that Form 150 summary that KSDE slide mentioned too. All the weightings, so again, we're using that average, all the things that we're funded based on, and special ed, we'll talk a little bit later about that. Is converted back to an FTE, even though it's not funded per student. It's based on the teachers and categorical aid. Total FTE times the base aid, that's the general fund, plus your virtual, is your total state aid. Now, it's a lot of data and confusing, but that's a good historical chart to kind of know at a glance how the general fund is calculated. This is more of an easier, maybe less intimidating to look at summary. So I summarized the revenue, which general fund is just state aid and special ed. That 20 mils that all of our local taxpayers pay goes to the state, comes back to us in the form of state aid. Special ed, again, is based on our number of teachers and paras. General fund expenses, I kind of summarized big categories there. So a lot of it is salaries and transfers. So that's 92%. Transfers going to other funds, they're listed down below. And a lot of times out of those funds, that's also paid salary. So a lot of people want to know, how much we spend on salary? Well, it's kind of like SOS registration. Those are hard numbers-ish to come up with because there are a lot of places. So for example, special ed transfer pays our co-op assessment for special ed. But at risk, that is, the bulk of that is salary. So you kind of always got to factor that in, but that's how the transfers in the budget work. You have to pay it out of that fund, and we transfer it from the general fund over there. Think of it like a pitcher of water. General fund's the full, and you can pour it out into all the funds, and then when it's empty, it's done. Assessed value, of course, plays a part in everything tax-wise and district budgeting. So last year, the assessed values for the district as a whole were up 13.8%. This year, they're up 5.7%. So over 16 years, that's a 65% increase. Again, divide that by 16 years, it's about 4% average per year. Some of you that have been around remember the years that it went down and the years that it's ebbed and flowed. But now they've been positive for many years, assessed value, and that's about 4% per year. But that gives you the total district assessed value. Again, that's Miami County and Franklin County. We have a little slice, a little sliver of Franklin County. Delinquency, I put that in there, the history, because as I mentioned, that's an assumption for the budget. We always base it on 4%. We've done that probably every year since I've been here, and maybe even before, because I probably just mirrored what was done. But the actual delinquency, I mean, our delinquency in Miami County is really, really low, which is good, because again, if you budget and then there's a big swing in that, you know, but that's why we always leave that at 4%, just to have that cushion in case something should change. Because again, you don't know that until after taxes are due. Again, another chart, we don't control the axis or the diagramming of it, but just graphically showing what that assessed value has done for our district. Again, both counties combined. So I've kind of mentioned this probably more times than not, but hopefully if there's a takeaway that people take away, they will understand that when assessed value increases, our relative wealth as a district can also increase for the state. And that's not necessarily a positive for us, because as our assessed value per pupil increases above the state average, we lose state aid. And so talking about budgets being revenue neutral, you know, that's a negative to our budget. So again, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but there's the link if you want to really get in the weeds and read the statute, how that works. But basically for every 1% above, for each $1,000 above, you lose 1% state aid. And you'll see that here in a minute. So for this year, our budget, capital outlay state aid, 0%. That's what we're going to get. Bond and interest state aid, 0%. Any bonds that we would pass in the future, 0%. It's pretty easy to calculate, 0. This was 9% last year on the bond and interest state aid. But again, that assessed value per pupil, we now are no longer eligible for bond and interest state aid. This is our last year of our bond. We'll talk more about that. LOB state aid has decreased almost 5%. That mirrors last year. So 2 years, we've lost 10%. Capital outlay again, 9 to 0. Bond and interest, 9 to 0. So put dollars to that rather than just percents. $421,000 that we've lost this year, state aid. Last year, it's $343,000. So that's cumulative. So you start adding that up. It's a significant amount of money that shift. Because again, the assessed value per pupil relative to the rest of the state, because of what our property values have done and what our enrollment has done, we are considered more wealthy. And so by the formula, we receive less state aid. So to be even revenue neutral, this has to come from somewhere so that it's not revenue negative to our budget. You've probably heard me say a lot of times, it's always a good practice to not compare actual to budget, but there's times that I think as long as you acknowledge that you're doing that, it's okay. So this is kind of a little bit of a busy slide, but I've tried to show here what the general fund was last year and what it was this year. Typically, your cash balance is $0 in general fund. You may remember during the CPA audit summary last year that $22 was some mineral tax from Franklin County. That we have to do this local effort report, quick turnaround. We always have them tell us how much money they're sending us for that last year or that June tax payment, and they gave us a wrong amount. So we got the joy of carrying a whopping $22 balance for the year, which is just annoying to look at because anybody that does school finance, you know that should be zero or is typically zero. But anyway, that's the difference why I point that out. You don't budget reimbursements, but different things come in and are considered miscellaneous reimbursement that you can overspend your general fund. State aid and special ed is the total. So again, the budget for this year matches what you've already seen, but this is last year's actual and last year's budgeted. So I kind of highlighted in green because again, comparing budget to budget is always best and actual to actual. So I'm going against that a little bit, showing budgeted $15.7 million, last year's $14.8. That's a difference of $905,000, a general fund increase. You'll see that again. Now I note here, that is again, all those assumptions and all that cushion in there to avoid republishing budget, which doesn't affect locally the tax rate, but it just gives us the legal authority. That will probably not, you'll see that on the next slide, not be $900,000 because we have extra built in there so we don't have to republish. And in case special ed rates would change or something would change, we don't have to come back and republish the whole thing, which is just kind of another exercise. Again, it doesn't change our local tax rates. This is just what's coming from the state. So again, just looking at state aid, last year was $11.8 million, but we budgeted $12.1 million. So we received $324,000 less than budget. Again, that's that cushion, that's that authority. Doesn't change tax-wise, but gives you the cushion in there, which again is what KSD recommends when they look at our budget. They look at all those things and make sure you've got adequate capacity built in there, because in my opinion, it's best to not republish. Just it's a step that you don't have to take. For example, capers, when they made some changes in that, one year you're supposed to get quarterly payments, one year we didn't, one year we got 5 quarters instead of 4, and if we did have to republish capers one year, and I said never again will we republish capers, it's just a flow through. So anyway, that's part of that scenario. But again, so the $900,000 general fund increase, you've seen this before in a lot of different things. That was the KSDE increase, plus the LOB is about that $900,000. Now again, that other slide didn't have LOB. But again, so that gives you an idea of roughly what that cushion is. And again, that's what I showed there, $324,000. So just to kind of explain why that may not mesh exactly over to this. But again, with the LOB going up, it goes up in tandem with the general fund. But again, we've lost that state aid because of the assessed value per pupil. So I call that net budget increase because this goes away from the state. And then again, increasing costs, as everyone has increasing costs every year. We gave a raise to salaries, to staff, and so benefits costs have gone up as well. That was $618,000 that was approved during negotiations. The bus contract goes up 3% every year as an example of one that we spend about $1 million a year on busing. So that's significant. And then LOB, that's where really all of the operational things are, the utilities, the insurance, and you remember what happened with the property and casualty insurance. And the work comp goes up based on our mod rating and our payrolls and different things. So those things right there, which again I say is partial list, that's $792,000 of the $899. Guarantee you, and $100,000 in your own budget is significant. In the school budget, $50 million. I mean, I could have kept this list going on and on and on, but try to keep it down so we get out of here before midnight. Any questions so far? Is anybody totally lost yet? We'll go a little faster. So in the budget review, I have a section in there for every fund. So this is LOB, local option budget. So again, it shows last year actual, last year budget. So you kind of, again, see that authority in there. This year proposed budget. The difference is budget to budget in dollars and then in percent. And there's hyperlinks in there. This document is not on the website yet until it's presented tonight. It will be tomorrow. It'll be in Board Docs, and it'll be on the website. And these links will be clickable, so you can click that and go out and read more about LOB. Again, when we passed our LOB, that we have the authority up to 33%, and what the mill levy is based in this budget at the 32%. Again, just like general fund, a little summary of the revenue. LOB has balance, and again, that's a function of that budgeting based on a delinquency rate higher than what we ever expect. you're going to collect more tax. That creates a balance, it rolls to the next year. So your budget is determined by taking your cash balance plus the local tax plus the state aid, which we are still getting the state aid on LOB, that's the only thing, other than capital outlay bonding, this was went to zero. Went down, but we're still getting, so those three components come up with the total LOB budget. And then again, there's transfers into there, I detail those down here below, which again, there's salaries, for example, vocational, majority of that is paying salaries for vocational teachers, same thing for everest. But there's basically the operational budgets of the school, the non-salary things. The only salary in here, maintenance salaries are in here. If you remember from general fund, there's about 300,000 miscellaneous. If really that's out of general, it would almost be salaries and transfers all out of general fund. But that's been out of LOB, it can be moved, but you know, they get combined in the end, in essence, whichever one you pay it out of. But insurance, repairs, water bills, textbooks, technology, and all the other remaining expenses. So just to try to give a little bit of a summary there. Same thing as I did on general fund, LOB is a little more straightforward, showing again the balance, and you can see it did increase based on the tax collection. It had been 300,000, it's 386. Again, that rolls forward, so you can't spend the balance in the year you collected too much. It rolls to the next year, and that lowers the mill levy needed that year by that amount. So again, it's always a roll, you always have a balance there. Again, the local taxes, local property taxes, paid, state aid, and the total. And then that's the increase. Kind of ties back to what I had on that other slide. Again, right there. So not exact, because this one, again, was back earlier in the year, but again, close. 216,223, pretty close. Again, that's just a recap, just so you kind of see that when you talk about the LOB. All the changes, just like enrollment changes, a big change the last several years is we've had ESSER money for many years. We've had ESSER 1, we had a round of ESSER 2, and then ESSER 3, our district used over 2 different fiscal years. We expended all of our ESSER money at the budget ending June 30th. It has to be done by September 30th, so we would have been done anyway, but getting it done in one fiscal year is going to help us in reporting and things. But again, that was a significant influx of funds that came in federally during a time when we had declining enrollment as well, but those are gone. So again, it's a one-time event, and hopefully for a lot of reasons that's never, COVID and things is never, anything like that is hopefully going to be necessary. So generally speaking, I mean, this is like the understatement of the day, I know, but it's always important, I think, to say it, that if our expenses exceeded our revenue, the only way we would be able to function and fund that, cash flow that, is to use our fund balances. And so if that were to happen because of all the changes or whatever, when we know the final enrollment, the audited budget, and the final special ed state aid, which you don't know until late in the budget next year, the fund balances could decline. Again, understatement, cash balance, just like your own savings, you can spend it one time. You can't just keep spending it over and over. So once the cash balance is gone, it's gone. You gotta make a change. We are at our maximum for LOB, can't go any higher. We're at our maximum for capital outlay, can't go any higher. Our enrollment's not growing, so that's another way we're kind of limited, if you will. There's lids on all those things. And again, the federal ESSER funds were expended. And so the revenue and the expenses have to reconcile. You can't have a deficit budget. So that's the importance of fund balance. This, again, for board members that have been here on the board a while, you'll remember this budgetopoly exercise we did back clear in November of 2019. It's hard to believe it was that long ago. But the themes are still relevant. So back then we had this Monopoly-ish like exercise that we went through to kind of make it a little easier to understand the budgeting. So we had these green cards that were basically sources of funds. We had the red cards that were uses of funds, and then we had wild cards, things like, oops, your health insurance fund went haywire, you had to fund, or audit exceptions. It was, again, a reminder that we don't even know what our budget is until later, so you have to build some of those cushions in. So anyway, a lot of that's still in play today. We're still dealing with inflation today. Cash balances, again, you can only spend one time. Declining enrollment, or just not increasing enrollment, again, limits what your budget can support. This, again, is from November 2020, but again, about cash balances. Sometimes cash balances get a lot of scrutiny. We were selected and had the opportunity to be a district that was subject to a legislative post-audit. These were the districts listed there. And there was a whole report on that you can find online as well. But this was the final, what I thought was the best summary of the whole thing. So they looked at all your cash balances. This 100% was best practice minimum, what they said you should be, which is recommended by the government. It's GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, of 2 months of operating expenses. They did a whole lot of analysis of it, but again, it's not very specific, but you can see where we were. This is 100%, this line's 125, so I'm going to say roughly we were 110%. So slightly above, but if you look where we're at in the middle of things, these districts in red don't have enough money on hand. This district over here had twice as much. So where would I think the best place to be? Right in the middle, I think, we were pretty close to 100%. I mean, these were right at 100. We're just slightly above. Again, you've got to know what goes into that. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, about the importance of cash balance and why we have reserves. This is in the budget, all your cash balances as of July 1. And again, that was in my board report in July. We're going to have to report that to you. But this is in the budget every single year. It shows you the total by fund, and then it divides that by the enrollment, so you get an amount per pupil. So you can kind of compare, just because your dollars go up, depends on what your enrollment is. So that's kind of a consistent way to look at it as amount per pupil. This rec commission was the first year of the employee benefit. No, I take it back. This was old. This was the fund. When you budget, and again with the delinquency and things, we carried a balance and paid them the next year because of a budget authority. But then they really don't have a cash balance. It's zero. You see that on the financials. Now, as it's rolling and we have enough authority, as soon as we get tax money, we pay it out to them. This is also in that same thing. It takes it percent of your total expenditures. So even though our balances have gone up, our budgets have also gone up. So you can see what the percents have done. So again, we had 30% carryover, 29. So again, dollars are higher, but percent is pretty consistent. Again, a chart from that. We don't pick the shapes or the ranges, but that's there. Cash balances, again, why do you have them? Hopefully you've heard some of that already. But I always say it's similar to expenditure per pupils, the expenditure per pupil figures. You have to know the why. Our expenditure per pupil, and I have a slide coming up, and I'm going to be shocked, you know that. We're always a lot higher because of all the things we host. The co-op, parents as teachers, adult ed. Doesn't affect taxpayers, but it does make our expenditure per pupil higher, and you'll see that in a minute. And so we consistently try to remind public and legislators of that. Why does Paley USD368 look like they spend $10,000 more than anybody else per student? We'll show you why. It's because of that. So again, the parallel I'm drawing there is you have to know the story behind it. You have to know what funds you have. Like we have self-insured health insurance. So we have a reserve balance. If you weren't self-insured, you wouldn't have a reserve balance, so you wouldn't have a cash balance in that figure. So you've got to know all those things. You got to know, do you have a bond issue? Or are you paying for things out of capital outlay? That depends if you're saving up money to do things, paying with cash through capital outlay rather than a bond issue. So all those things make a difference in how much cash balance you have. All right, and I used to go through these line by line, so this, believe it or not, is abbreviated from years and years ago. All the other funds that there aren't major changes in, this is a summary. There is a code in there, and the whole thing is hundreds of pages out there for every budgeted fund. The levied ones that affect taxpayers are in blue. Again, federal funds, you see a big decrease there. Why I highlighted that? That's because of that COVID money. This is back now to normal, just the basically title monies and things that come in. You'll see a little bit more in that. But a lot of these, you can see not a lot of change in some of those. So I don't spend a lot of time going through. We can talk about any of them you want. But that's kind of the quick version of, because we have all those funds that we manage. Then there's page 2. So again, in blue is the levied funds, bonded interest. We're going to talk a little more in depth on that. Special assessment is not anything we levy anymore, but it is a levied fund. That's where that money came from. It's just kind of parked there until some point that there could be a need for that. We'll talk a little more about that when we get to that. But again, the special ed co-op is over $20 million that runs through our budget. That we'll talk a little about the impact of that. Again, at risk is based on the free lunch. number of free lunch students that are eligible for free lunches. And so you can see, and there'll be a chart again on the next page that'll show this a little easier in a graph. Again, we've estimated it, but you can kind of see that this is what we had budgeted, and then the actual is on this bottom line here. And you'll see that here on this next. So this is actual, other than this year, I always point out, this is estimate, because we don't know what that September 20th count is going to be. So this is just what we built the budget on. But look at that trend, 434 from 4 years ago, 469 to 547 to 601. So the number of free lunch eligible students and families is increasing. And what will that be this year? We'll know once we have the audited, verified numbers through food service. But I think that shows the trend and the economic climate of the world that we live in. So that plays a big part in educating those students. Again, special ed, I won't spend a lot of time on this. It's not funded per student. It's based on categorical aid, which is per teacher and per para. But I will say special ed and fully funding special ed was a big rallying cry the last several legislative sessions. As you saw on that slide in the beginning, there was about $75 million extra dollars put to special ed. And there's a link in here that you can go out and see how that's calculated, the local contribution. And so the estimated increase for Paley USD368 is $216,000. There's the link to that. You can see the details of that. We actually are again rounded that up, so it's budgeted authority at around $250,000. We have some other things that pass through special ed and things, but again, that fund typically pays our special assessment to the co-op and transportation and some other things out there. Again, this is a K-3 slide about that additional special ed money, showing that $75 million, if you want to see the details in there on how some of that's going to work. Special Reserve Fund is health insurance. We've been fully insured Blue Cross for 2 years. You see that the whole front page of my board report every month is about health insurance because it's important and it matters. We will be going back, and we knew that the fully insured wasn't going to last because we've had 37% or so increases for 2 years, not sustainable with Blue Cross. Bucati Companies has done a lot of work. They're our health insurance broker. And as I mentioned in here and also my board report, that we will be going with a company called Centivo, the Centris Network. So there's a couple different options. We typically had 3 plans. We'll now have 4. It's a narrow network, and people can choose. There's actually some options in here now for this narrow network. Narrow meaning they direct people to lower cost providers, but still with good results. So it's not like they're sacrificing quality of care, but it's the cost. So they're not letting you go to the most expensive hospital. And there is a difference if you've never researched that. So this narrow network, if employees choose that plan, they can actually reduce their monthly health insurance costs. The district's putting in $50 more a month. That was part of negotiations toward that, but the employees can actually reduce that. Now, if it doesn't fit, we also have traditional plans that those have the increases that we've been seeing traditionally in the past. So those would cost them more, but they can choose their plan. Bond and interest, again, I've probably beat that enough to know that we're getting 0% state aid. So again, that's the history there. You can look back to when we were getting 20 and 30% state aid, 0. So I guess the silver lining maybe is good that this is the last year our bonds will pay off. So again, if that would have happened years ago, we'd had several years of no state aid. It's going to be 1, and our bonds will pay off in next July, as I've got down here. Show you a little more about this. Again, is that chart showing what we've been decreasing rapidly because we're toward the back end of the amortization on our payoff. $6.3 million was as of July 1. We'll make payments this year, and then we'll pay that off next July. They were scheduled to pay off in 2028. Our bond consultant had said 2025, and they will. This is the balance, how that $6.3 million breaks out, when they would have normally been paid off, and we're going to pay them off in the 25-26 fiscal year. It'll actually be in July, but that's a next budget year. But there will be no mill levy. We will collect all the tax money this year. We will have a sufficient cash balance, and we'll actually pay it off in July. We could have even potentially done it this year, but just to make sure and not rush things and to know that we've got the cash that we need, we'll do it in next year's budget. So there will be a budget code, but the mill levy will be 0. So again, you've seen this before. These are the things we currently levy. We of course have a general fund, as every district does 20 mills, no matter what. They have to do that. Your LOB depends on your local voters. When ours was approved, we have the 33% authorization. Our capital outlay was approved for up to the 8 mills in 2014. And our last bond was passed in 2014. Again, bond issues have to go to the voters for approval. We'll be paying that off next year, like I said. And then the rec commission, while not ours, hence the gap, it does flow through us. It uses our district tax base for that. But that was voter approved in 2021. And you'll see that through our budget as well. They have their own board. They do their own budget publication. They've already had their hearing. And they are also revenue neutral this year as well. If I didn't say that already enough about ours, that this is a revenue neutral budget. So believe it or not, there's a lot of slides you don't see this year because we're revenue neutral. These are the things we don't levy. And again, I mentioned this in July. I mentioned it again, just because this is what I think the board will need to consider, some of these things, or at least taking some action during this fiscal year to have those as options for when our bonds roll off. Because unless we're going to run another bond issue, we have to maintain our existing buildings out of our capital outlay funds now. And you've seen that list that we present every year, and you know how far that money does or doesn't go, and what some of the deferred things are. And so these could be some options that we could, while those are paying off, still give mills back to our taxpayers. We'll still have a significant reduction, should be able to be revenue neutral again next year, but shift some of those to the operating. And again, we'll be paying cash for all the things we're doing. We won't have any debt costs. We won't have interest. And there's not a lot of entities that can say that because they have outstanding bond issues. And there's an interest cost to that. So we're not paying interest anymore. We're still, obviously it's tax money, but there's no interest on top of that. We're going to be using cash. But we'll share more information about that. You've seen this slide before. We'll get some more details. This is one of those things that the board could consider to do for next budget year, the cost of living. This was the prior slide, so I added this year. This year, we could have levied up to 3.25% of our general fund. And again, this is based on the housing costs of your community. So again, it goes back to the assessed value per pupil, the relative wealth. It's again showing what the cost of housing in our community is. And the theory behind cost of living is if it costs more to live in your community, you're going to have to pay people more, or they're not going to live there and work there. You have to pay them more because it costs them more to live there. So that's why you can levy this additional if you're eligible, which Palo and Lewisburg in Miami County are, as Spring Hill and most of Johnson County, because again, the housing costs. So we could have levied this year 3.25% of our general fund, or over $500,000. We're not levying anything, but that's where I think we may need to consider that to maintain what we're not going to have bond money to do. Again, the co-op all runs through us. There's 8 districts in the co-op. They're all listed there. It all runs through us and inflates our budget, but does not negatively affect our tax bill. You can't say that enough. It doesn't. There's not a negative impact, but it makes that expenditure per pupil. That's why we look so odd. And you'll see that in there. Again, the total in there. So if you look at the total, and there's a lot in there. Again, how you can slice and dice this, but just budget to budget, 2.8% increase. Again, that's all the other things that aren't necessarily just payroll either. But again, that's the budget authority. I put in there last year what the actual was, what the published budget was, what the net was, so you kind of get an idea. Again, budget authority. Overall, this is what the mill levy impact will be: general fund, LOB, capital outlay, bond and interest, special assessment. Again, we're not levying it. That was from years ago, is how that $26,000 is just out there. Again, it could be levied, but it is not. Total mill levy, oh yeah, sorry, I was reading that wrong. I was like, what? 49.5 was last year actual, projected this year 47.9, 1.5 and change mill levy decrease. But revenue neutral, it's really your mill levy matters, but it's not the measuring stick, it's taxes collected. And last year, our taxes levied were over $11.5 million. This year, they're less than that. That's why this is a revenue neutral budget, because we are collecting the same or less than the prior year. If you're going up, then you're exceeding revenue neutral, and you have to do different things. This is a revenue neutral budget. It's actually a little under. This again is a chart in there. just the mill rates by funds. A little more just expanded information there about the change. The general fund, taxes levied, 4.2 million. Comparing that to last year's budget published is down $117,000. Again, that's that state 20 mills, and that is the change based on that exemption that was done by the state legislature. Our LOB, taking that, the 33%, as that goes up with the general fund, that actually the fund itself is higher. Capital outlay, back to the 8 mills. Last year we were at the 6.8. Again, we had that KDHE grant that we mentioned previously. That was $634,000, I believe, that helped us. Technically, capital outlay last year was revenue neutral as well, even though the overall budget was not. That is how that 6.8 came up. So this technically is still revenue neutral overall, but it gets us back to the 8 mills, which again, we're going to need in the absence of bonds to pay for the building and maintenance and things. Bond and interest, again, is 5.69 in this budget. That's $936,000 less than last year. And again, next year, there won't be a levy. So again, the total $182,000 decrease over the prior year. And that, again, is after, or could have been higher, depending on how you want to look at this. We're losing $421,000 state aid. And so that's revenue negative, not neutral. That shifted to local. If that hadn't happened, we hadn't lost state aid, it wouldn't have to shift to local, and it could have been a $600,000 decrease. You can't really do anything about that because that's how the formula works. But I think that's important to note, that that is what's happening. I'm not saying that's good or bad about the formula, that's just the way it works. And if you look at that longer term history, like I showed you, 421,000 this year, last year I think it was 340,000 or so. I mean, it adds up in a hurry to a lot of significant money that's shifted over the years because of assessed value. So again, everyone thinks that generates always more money for local entities, and it does play a part of it, but in the school finance formula, it actually costs us. Again, mill rate chart, standard, longer history here, looking back more years, same information, same concept, same structure, just a longer look back at mill levy and what we've done mill levy wise, total taxes. Again, this is out there. It has been in the newspaper for the budget hearing tonight. I'm always available for questions. We're getting close to the end, I promise you. But I think it's always good to look at the mill levy in comparison to other schools. This is available on the Miami County Clerk's website as well. That's the source that I cite down there. But you can see where we rank. And this is again last year because people are doing their budgets right now. But you see what our budget's going to be. And knowing what Lewisburg's has been published at, and depending if they approve the final, we'll probably drop down to the second lowest spot behind Prairie View, which again, they have a sliver of Miami County. I think of them more as Lynn County, but they do have, this is any school district that gets tax money from Miami County. So that's why those are listed on here, anybody that receives tax revenue from Miami County. So again, I think it's important to note that. Again, the legislature, they are the ones that were behind the general fund decrease based on that exemption change. This was the fiscal note from the special session of what tax cuts they passed. This again was the Jimmy summary, as I called it. And I just point out, again, this right here is the property tax relief that the legislature passed. Now out of the two, this was $2 billion, $236 million was property tax, 11.8%. A lot of it was in income tax. So people are going to see that as well because of what the state legislature did. But your property tax, which has been a focus in a lot of communities, that is actually what that exemption turned out to be. And I know Samantha shared what that dollar amount was per property and changing that to the exemption. So that's out there on the July presentation as well, if you want to revisit that. All those slides are there. So again, the per pupil, we have a lot of unique things in our district. We host parents as teachers, we host adult ed. We get some neglected money for Lake Mary that runs through it. If a district doesn't have a program like that, they don't have that. The co-op's over $20 million. Carl Perkins is now going away. It used to run through the budget. Was never a significant amount of money, but it's now just part of the Greenbush. But once you total all those things up, our budget is the 34th largest out of 286 school districts. And we are not the 34th largest school district in the state of Kansas. But again, it's all those things that flow through. So it's important to know that for expenditure per pupil. Again, I can't say enough, it's not a negative to taxpayers, because like the co-op, those districts are paying us their share. It just flows through us. Someone has to report it. So they take our total expenditure, divide it by our Paola students, and that's why we show a lot higher. So putting numbers to this. This again, I quote the source there. This is kind of a little bit of an art more than a science, but again, it's last year budgeted. This is straight from the KSDE data warehouse that anybody can get publicly. Total expenses, less those things I mentioned, which again, I footnote, and I want to make sure and point that out. Part of those are ours. The adult ed program is Paola knows a lot of it. We have students at Lake Mary. Parents as teachers, we're one of the districts in there. We're in the co-op. If we weren't in the co-op, we would be doing our own special ed program. So part of those things are ours. So again, this is netting them out. So we would be $32,000 per student if you take the total expenses divided by our FTE for that year. So that's the 24th highest. It's not really where you want to be high on the ranking. But you net those off, that's over $12,000. There, I put the bottom in there. So net that off, we're at 20,000, 192nd out of 286. That's a whole lot better place to be. The state range, this is an outlier. I don't remember the second one, but that is the true range. Low of 9,900, $163,000. There's something weird there. I mean, you could dig into that and figure it out. But again, that's the range. The state average is 23,936. So obviously here, we would be significantly above. That's, I usually say $10,000. But once you net those things out, we're more right in the realm of average. So maybe I beat that horse enough, but it's important to note, because every now and then that comes out and people think, what are you doing in Paola? But again, I say that does not negatively affect our taxes. Expenditure preference, I'll skip through some of these. This is just, again, just pointing out, we get state money, we get federal money, we get local money, which a lot of that's that co-op, experience of teachers and flow through. Revenues per pupil, I just point out, those are actual. Again, we don't control this chart. That I added the red. This is budget. So again, actual is better than comparing actual to budget. So you need to know what you're comparing to. That's why I point that out. Notice of hearing, this is what was in the newspaper, showing that we're having our hearing tonight at 6 o'clock. Public's had an opportunity to comment here tonight. We're reviewing the information in detail. This is what you approved in July, was published in the newspaper. Taxpayer notices have gone out as well. Again, this is the overview of the whole form, kind of what it looks like. This is an actual notice, but edited out to just generic information. So again, it's got your individual property information at the top. Obviously, these aren't zeros, but it's to give you an idea. This would be hundreds of thousands, and then this would be your assessed value, whatever your property is worth. Your information would be there. This is residential. If it was commercial, it would be commercial, whatever your description is. These have actual dollar amounts, of course. This one is from a residence in the city of Paola. Makes a difference whether you're in the city or in the county. But if you're in the school district, even out in the county, it looks a little different because you don't pay city taxes, for example. But the county is revenue neutral. So I put those in red. This form is not in color. And again, I edited this just to be clear. But because they're revenue neutral, that's a negative in the dollars and the percents. The rec commission was the same thing. Again, depends some on your assessed value what happens too. But if you were less than what the average increase was, and this particular property was about a 2.5% increase. So those were negatives. Paola School District were negative. Again, your notice would have your dollars in there, what those are going to be. The city of Paola and the Extension District were positive numbers. They are not revenue neutral. So that could be a tax increase for people. Again, then the hearing dates and times are in there as well. I highlighted ours. It says no hearing required because we're revenue neutral. So we didn't have to have a revenue neutral hearing. We just have to have our budget hearing. Normal years we'd have both. Again, this is red. This is showing that City of Paola and the Extension District were exceeding revenue neutral. So depending on, again, your assessed value, you could have a tax increase from that. So again, we, Paola School District, are revenue neutral. So, down to just the action for tonight, what we are doing is approving the budget with, again, consideration, clear back at the beginning, however long I've been talking, about the building needs and state assessments, taking that into account and making that note. That'll be in the minutes, showing that, again, that the board has considered that.
But what you're actually approving tonight is the Code 1, the Code 99, which again are out there in board docs, just those files, so they're easy to find. That's what Michelle will sign, I will sign after you approve. The budget certification is this little snippet. That's what the superintendent signs, and those things all get sent to Miami County and also the KSDE. The other part after we approve the budget is we also have to approve the local option budget. And so that's just showing that we're levying a 33% LOB. You as a board have to approve that. This is the resolution. I will sign that as the clerk of the board, and that will be approved as well. So all that's come down to just 3 or 4 little documents, basically. Very easy at the end, but questions? A lot of information.
The tax bill that was passed actually requires any amount of the reduction in the state school district finance fund to be transferred from the general fund over. So the amount that we're missing on the 20 mills, the general fund is supposed to supplement that.
Stage.
What do you mean by missing?
So we have the exemption
Oh.
that went from 42,000 to 75,000. That chunk of change there that we're no longer receiving from the property tax is supposed to be transferred from the state general fund to make up for it.
Oh, okay, state general fund.
Right, so
Yes, I'm sorry, I thought we were
is
talking
that
about.
calculated in that? Because you said that we have a loss of that income there, so I want to make sure that that is calculated.
Yes, correct. Yes,
Okay.
yes. We're not really a lot, I could go back to that. It'd take me a while to get there. Can you escape me out and go back to that slide?
Where am I going?
Scroll me back up to the, probably too far.
So that slide showed what
What the reduction.
what the
locally
reduction is locally.
But yes, we're not losing that, but that to me was where I was trying to show, it's the Code 1.
So that would be for the local, the amount less for local taxpayers.
Right, they're paying
And then
it
the
less, but
state
we're
is-
still,
Correct.
yeah, we're
Yes,
getting
yes.
reimbursed for that.
I thought you were saying that districts had to transfer. No, we don't
No.
have to. Yes, we
Okay.
will get our 20 mills in full.
Okay,
But our taxpayers are paying less to fund that 20 mil. You're exactly right, I know what you're saying.
okay,
The state of Kansas, in their reserve, it is coming out of that balance,
Okay.
their surplus, correct. I thought you were saying we had to make a transfer.
No.
Well, that's news to me. But yes, you're exactly right.
Okay.
So I put that in there, that was the Code 1 budget to the Code 1 budget of a year ago.
Mhm.
So I wanted to show that as the decrease, to give credit to the legislature for what they did do. That is tax relief. But yes, won't affect us negatively.
okay.
It just comes from the state general fund balance.
Okay, just making sure
Correct.
that.
Sorry, I was
No.
on our general fund. I was scared for a moment.
And I had one other thing, the statewide average for the 22-23 LOB was 31.57. Do we have the state average for that?
For this year?
23-24?
Did I have that in there, or was that somewhere else? Because typically they have that out there, because for your LOB, you can do the statewide average if you haven't passed your resolution. We actually did the election and things years ago. So that's why we go to the 32%. But if you didn't have that taxpayer right, you would go to statewide average. I don't remember if I have that in my presentation or not.
So if we
It
go-
won't be for this year because budgets are still being.
I was thinking
So
it
it'd
was-
be
I
a
think
year
it's
and a
not
half.
held until
32.
January, maybe. Because I saw.
I know KSDE had it in there, and their budget slides are out there, and I have them saved in my files too. I can't quote it to you off the top of my head, I could try to pull that up here.
It seems like I read it's
Mhm.
like low, like 32, like.
Okay,
Yeah, it's getting close to that 33, but I would say it's 31-ish. just
it
off
seems
the
like
top
it's
of my
going up a
head.
little every year.
Mhm.
Yeah, more and more to the average.
So if we vote for the 33, that needs to be published still?
We still have to pass the resolution regardless, because
Okay.
all it tells us what percent we're doing. And back, like in April of every year, we have to tell KSD what our maximum is.
Mhm.
And I always tell them the 33, because by then, you don't know what you need to do. And so if you say lower then, again, it's your maximum, you're capped at that. So yes, we have to, every district has to pass the resolution regardless,
Okay.
to specify the percent. And so ours, am I back? Will you maximize that again? Just do from current slide.
Where do you want to go?
Just make it bigger. Hit that from current slide to make it back full. Oh, no, that's from good. Go from current. They don't want me to start over. Oh, can you scroll me back down? Go to the very beginning.
the end?
Yeah.
Like here?
Yeah. Now, just maximize that. No,
Wrong button.
from current slide. If you go all the way to the bottom again.
Hang on.
Sorry, I gotta start over.
It's my fault.
All right, that's right where it's going now. Yeah. So that's small, the inboard docs. So anyway, we're publishing the 33%. So that's the resolution. Now, if we were exceeding revenue neutral, those of you who on the board know, you have to do this all by roll call vote. We don't have to do any of that because this is a revenue neutral budget. So it can just be a motion to approve the budget with those things. Now, this has to be separate, and this all has to happen during the hearing because we're still in the hearing. And then you'll close the hearing, and then everything will be certified for accounting things. So yes, 33%. Does that answer you enough?
Yep.
Okay. I can look that up for you later, but it's in the.
The only one number I found online was the 22, 23. So, but that was just a quick search.
Yeah, I think the 23, 24 should be out there. Now, you're 24, 25, obviously not, until everybody's done and certified. But yeah, I think you're right. They usually like release that January-ish. Yeah. Other questions about budget or how it works? Apologize for the lengthy information there. Really no change from what you saw in July, just a lot of the details.
So next, we need a motion to close the budget hearing for 2024-2025.
So moved.
Second.
Second. So we've had a motion and a second. All those in favor of closing the budget hearing? Okay, thank you. Okay, so up next, we have open forum, and we have a couple this evening. And so we'll just go in the order that they were received. And just a little note, the form needs to be returned to the clerk or designee 10 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. And each open forum is not to exceed 5 minutes. Patrons are advised the BOE members will not entertain questions or discussion and will not take action. According to the Kansas law KSA 75-4319, the board shall not hear personal complaints concerning any employee or groups of employees of the school district or any person connected with the school district during open session, matters relating to the security of the board, the school buildings, or facilities, or the information system of the school, or other topics defined as part of KSA 75-4319. So the first open forum that was turned in is Ainsley Jennings. So you could come to the podium, please. And can you tell us your address, please?
120 Motorworks Road, Bangor.
Okay, thank you. And your time will be shown on the screen there.
Okay. Can I pass out something really quick?
Sure.
Just a little visual for you guys. I was told to start with the superintendent, so
Yes.
I don't need to skip anybody.
You're good. Thank you.
Share.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, school board members and fellow parents. My name is Ainsley Jennings, and I have a kindergartner that will be starting time with elementary this fall. Sorry, I don't know why I'm emotional. I followed proper procedure and brought my concerns to Cottonwood's principal, the superintendent, and our District 3 school board member. I appreciate their time hearing me out, but address the entire board today due to unresolved concern and disappointment. Today I would like to discuss the safety of children who live within the 2.5 mile boundary of the schools and are therefore disqualified from bus services. I believe that children's safety should be a top priority that our district takes pride in. A rural distance should not trump safety. Some students who live within the 2.5 mile boundary of the schools do not have a safe path with access to sidewalks. For example, if you look at my handout, we live across the road from the Palo Golf Course on Waterworks Road. For my 5-year-old son to walk to school, he would have to cross a 45-mile-per-hour road that doesn't have a crosswalk or stop sign, walk alongside a 35-mile-per-hour road without sidewalks, cross railroad tracks, and then walk alongside a 45-mile-per-hour road without sidewalks. The non-direct route to school is a bit safer of the two options, however, he would still have to walk on a 45-mile-per-hour road without sidewalks, and the distance is increased to 2.8 miles. I understand that the direct route to school is less than 2.5 miles, however, this is completely unsafe and not an option. Therefore, it doesn't make any sense for my child to be disqualified from riding the bus for an unsafe option. Especially when a bus passes our house every morning and turns around at the end of our street. I'm aware that there are other factors, such as a shortage of bus drivers and limitations on the allocation of state funding. However, what rules our decisions is safety the main concern. A safe, reliable way to school should be the standard for each student. Surrounding school districts have accommodations for children in these circumstances, whether it's pay-to-ride or shuttle system. They have found ways around the limits of state funding, and I believe we can too. Therefore, I propose that reasonable accommodations should be made for children that live within the 2.5 mile boundary but do not have a safe route to school. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next open forum is Robert Zoller. You want to come on up to the podium and give us your address, please?
My address is 29580 Lone Star Road, Paola. And I'm here also representing Dale Klossmeyer. And I had passed out some information, and I'll read some of it. What Klossmeyer's water retention proposal for Paola School District. Dale Klossmeyer has received a conditional rezoning for building at 25605 OKC Road to rezone to commercial. The major condition he has to meet to install a water retention system on the property in order to upgrade the zoning from residential to commercial. The land slopes to the east towards the school district and currently is causing water pooling on the school district property. Dale has to spend a substantial sum of money collecting the water on the east side of his property, pumping it to a retention pond on the northwest side of the property, and then pumping it again out to a retention pond in a ditch along OKC Road. Our proposal is to come to an agreement with the school district where we would pay the school district to acquire an easement and share the use and extent of their existing water retention asset on the Hillsdale School property. We feel that this would be a win-win for both the school district and the Klossmeyers. It would allow Klossmeyers to use gravity to avoid the ongoing maintenance and issues with a system with multiple pumps. Benefits to the school district. They would receive revenue on their underutilized water retention asset. If the Klossmeyer's property is rezoned, it would increase the commercial tax base of the school district, and it would increase the property tax collected on the property from $5,000 a year to $25,000 a year, and that increase in taxes of $20,000 per year would be reoccurring every year. This agreement would help reduce the tax burden on homeowners and would be a great proactive example that the school district wants to have a public-private partnership to help increase the commercial tax base in our district. There's a storm drain that already exists on the northwest side of the school that would be tapped into, which would minimize excavation disruption to the school district. If the school district's retention pond needs to be made larger, that would be at Klossmeyer's expense. This option would be a revenue generator for the school district with no out-of-pocket expense to the school district. We have a couple different options here. Second one is, the second option would be for Klossmeyer's to buy land on the south side of the Dollar General store of the school district and build a commercial building that would have a water retention system that would be shared by the Klossmeyer's building on the north side of the Dollar General. This idea would also be greatly add to the commercial tax base of the school district, bring jobs to the area, and after listening to your budget, possibly bring children, because kids come with the parents and the parents have the jobs. And bring jobs to the area and turn surplus land into an ongoing revenue source through taxes for the school district. And the third idea would be the Klossmeyers would entertain the idea of buying the Hillsdale School from the school district, which would take an underutilized asset, put it on the tax rolls, and add a commercial tax rate, and there again, reduce the mill levy for taxpayers. And then further, you'll see some aerials on page 2 of the aerials, where I think the storm drain is, where a discharge pipe is close to the Klossmeyer's property line with the school district. There's another aerial showing school district's water retention basin. And I think there's no doubt in my mind it would be a win-win for the taxpayers, for the Klossmeyers. I could see it helping even to some extent if turning these buildings into commercial, adding jobs, kids getting jobs. That's it.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we move on to action items. We need to approve the 2024-2025 budget with consideration of building needs and state assessment results. Jimmy?
There's questions. You went over
Oh,
it.
yes, okay. Are there any questions?
I move to approve the 2024-2025 budget with consideration of building needs and state assessment results.
Second. Okay, there's been a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the 2024-25 budget with consideration of building needs and state assessment results?
Thank you.
Next, we need to approve the resolution to adopt local option budget LOB percentage.
And that just answers, Samantha, your question. The statewide average for last year was 32%. So it had been 31.6. So hence the resolution, because we're at 33%, which has already been taxpayer approved, but we have to do that every year. 32 is the statewide average. We're at 33.
I move to approve resolution to adopt the local option budget.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to approve resolution to adopt local option budget LOB percentage. Those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jimmy. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy. Very informational. All right, and Lastly, we need to approve the KASB Annual Conference Delegate and Alternate. Matt?
So I think all of you have at your table a postcard about the annual convention. It's November 15th through 17th. And so as part of that, and I'll let Kelly go into details, but there's what a delegate assembly is what they call it, to vote for legislative priorities and so forth. So I'm going to let Kelly talk about it because she's been on the legislative committee. She has been the voting member of the past to represent the board. So she can tell you kind of in more detail what exactly that entails.
So the legislative committee will, I guess I should back up. KSB will be having legislative listening tour, and so members of the staff will be going around listening to members and begin forming legislative policy for the 2025 legislative session. The legislative committee will meet in August, and then they will work until up until the November conference to formulate what the policy is going to look like. And so the legislative listening tour will be in Paola, August the 27th. Is that the right date? So Christian and Michelle will be attending that. There will be others from Region 2 that will be coming. There could be some others from some of the other regions that will come. And so that's what they will be formulating, those policies. And so at the delegate assembly, they will be seeking approval of that legislative platform. So it's important that if people have perspectives, that they send those with the people that will be attending the legislative listening tour, or that they let people know at KSB what they feel once those policies come out. We will get copies of them once the legislative committee has worked their magic with the words. We'll all get copies of them, and everybody will get a chance to look at it. But as for the conference, if you have not signed up, you should. If you can't go and stay, you can go for part of the day. Friday, there will be the district showcase, which is going to be like our SOS program could be a district showcase. And so last year there was kids there that had, and most of these are student driven programs. So there was a huge range of things that were there, and those kids were so excited to talk about their programs, and whatever they were super excited to talk to you about them. They are going to expand that offering. I think there was only 15 or 20 last year. They are going to expand that because it was such a big hit. So that's Friday. There is an opening session on Friday night. If you're able to come, great. And if you're not, that's great too. But Saturday will be, there'll be an opening session Saturday morning with Dr. Watson, the Commissioner of Education. He typically kicks off on Saturday morning, and then there'll be a ton of breakout sessions that you can pick from, and there'll be a bunch of different things. I should go back. Friday, there also will be some sessions on boardsmanship in the afternoon. There will be a session on developing a advocacy network locally, so like how to promote your story locally. And there also will be a session on the Roadmap to Literacy, which is that the program that Cindy Lane, Dr. Lane, is leading. So those are all the things on Friday. And then the delegate assembly, I think, is going to be Saturday at lunchtime. There's always a general session at lunchtime too. And then in the afternoon, there's more breakout sessions. They will start to have more information as to what those sessions are going to look like. But if you're able to go down and see some of them, they are worth going. If you can't make the whole weekend, but I would highly encourage attendance if at all possible.
If you are interested in attending, let Laura know. She can help get signed up, and if you need rooms and so forth to help coordinate that part of it. Rooms do usually go fairly quick, so the sooner we know, then just communicate that authority. But for this part, the board would need to elect a delegate, and in the past, they've usually elected an alternate in case something would happen. So there's somebody to represent the board.
And the delegate / alternate would need to be in attendance that weekend, correct?
I think they've had it where you could be virtual.
Oh, okay. 'Cause
So-
I'm not able to go that weekend.
So like if you were the alternate or the delegate, you could log on. and-
Oh, okay. Okay. That clarifies.
I mean, I'm gonna be there, so I would be happy to
I
do
was
it.
gonna say, I would like to nominate Kelly to be our delegate.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion. We do this now and then if there's any others? Okay, a motion and a second for Kelly Frankie to be our KASB annual conference delegate. Those in favor? Raise your hand. Now, do we want to vote on an alternate?
No, but I would like to nominate Amanda to be the alternate.
Oh, perfect. Wonderful.
Second.
Okay. There's been a motion and a second for Amanda Gherkin to be the alternate for the KASB annual conference delegate. All those in favor? Perfect.
Before you adjourn, real quick, I would like to introduce Brennan Riffle. Brennan just came in late due to back to school night, but Brennan is our new principal at Cottonwood Elementary. I told him that I wouldn't put him on the spot, so he knows this, that I told him just to say a couple things real quick to introduce himself to the board members and to the audience. So real quick, Brennan.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here at Paola. Coming here from, having spent the last 20 years at Sterling Grade School principal. So this is a nice change. And we had open house tonight, had a great turnout, and the teachers and staff have been great to work with. Sorry I was late. I did bring a note from my mother, if that helps. No, I'm glad to be here and just appreciate being part of the Paola School District. Everybody's been very kind and helpful, and this is just good to be a part of a good place.
Welcome, we're glad to have you.
Welcome.
I'm trying to get my principal voice back a little bit.
Yeah.
So
Matt,
that's,
can we, before we adjourn, can we make a motion or anything to look at this proposal like next, as far as putting it on the agenda next month or whatever? Is that a
I can have it as a
possibility?
discussion item.
Huh?
I can have it as a discussion
As a
item.
discussion item? Do we need to make a motion and vote on it tonight or anything, or is that something we can
I
do?
understand it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
great. Okay, and is there anything else? If not, we need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Okay. All those in favor of adjournment? Great.